Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and let's call this Season 2, Episode 0 of Star Wars 7x7, shall we? I've missed you. It's been 4 months since the last episode of what we're now calling Season 1 of Star Wars 7x7. Yeah, there was a 2-part interview that came out during the hiatus with Doug Burton, author of The Heroine's Labyrinth. I kind of think of that as my sort of Star Wars holiday special episode, but in a good way, right? Like, it was a really fun conversation. It's not a cringe thing like the holiday special was. Maybe that ends up being a bad analogy, but regardless, it's been a crazy 4 months. I cannot believe how quickly the time has gone by, and I'm really glad that we're going to be chatting again together. Now, of course, the exciting news is that Skeleton Crew is debuting in just a couple of days, but that's not necessarily what I wanted to talk about today because, a lot's gone on in the last 4 months. And I'm sure you've probably seen the meme kicking around, the somehow Palpatine returned thing that was making the rounds on social media this past month, and for, obvious reasons with what's been going on in the real world. And funnily enough, as I've been on hiatus and had a lot of time to think, I've actually come to appreciate the sequel trilogy more as a result of my time off, which is not something I was necessarily expecting to happen. I mean, I like it just fine, but yeah, I've come to appreciate it more because I think, one of the things that was depressing in a way about The Force Awakens when it came out was that the evils that we thought had been defeated in Star Wars storytelling hadn't really been defeated, right? They only went off into hiding and got pure and more malicious and more heartless and more destructive, right? I mean, I'm a Gen Xer, and so I grew up in the era of the Cold War, and we thought that, the Soviet Union had been defeated when the Berlin Wall fell, right? And then things did not go the way that we thought they would. In Star Wars, instead of being defeated, the Empire disappeared into the unknown regions and refined itself and got more purely evil. And yeah, it seems like that's kind of what's happening in our own world these days. And then I got to thinking about The Last Jedi, and in particular, a rumor that had been kicking around during production. So, of course, rumors and leaks and spoilers were, all the rage while The Last Jedi was in production. And one of the rumor reports that I remember seeing was that the Knights of Ren were going to track Luke and Rey to Luke's secret hideout on Ahch-To. And the thing that was remarkable about that was that they would show up, and Luke, according to the report, was just going to absolutely wipe the floor with them, basically. There were reports that he would just, wave his hand and a Knight of Ren would go flying off a cliff into the sea, and it would just be absolute madness, basically, that Luke would just be so incredibly powerful that 7 of these guys would show up and he would just go flick, 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 and they would be gone, right? So that got me thinking about this sort of strongman theory, this idea of I alone can fix it, right? And there's definitely kind of a strong desire for that in our society right now. And there are definitely systemic reasons for why that kind of strongman mentality would appeal to some folks for sure, because there are a lot of things that are not right with our country and with our world right now, and the appeal of somebody standing up and saying, I alone can fix it, to portray oneself as having, the kind of power at their disposal where they could just wipe a magic wand or wave a magic wand and, make everything fine. Like, there's an appeal to that. And it also even goes back as far as the Reagan administration and how they sold this idea of, the rugged cowboy, the individual kind of way of dealing with society, that you're on your own and you deal with stuff and you are supposed to be capable of dealing with your stuff, and it basically ends up being a way to destroy society, to destroy collective action, to destroy this notion that we all do well and do better together as a group, as a village, as opposed to having this lone wolf fantasy kind of thing where only one person has the power and that one person can take care of everything. And then you get to The Rise of Skywalker, and yeah, there's a world where you could look at The Rise of Skywalker and what happened in it as a reaction, and a bad one, we'll say, to what was put forth in The Last Jedi. But it occurs to me that there's another way to read that now. This whole somehow Palpatine returned thing, right? One of the things about the old extended universe, which is now Legends, is that in the 90s, when they were publishing book after book after book, Palpatine was somehow always returning through clones and Force possession and all these other crazy things. And at some point, the fine folks, which I think it was Del Rey at the time, now Random House Worlds, but Del Rey back then, eventually realized that they were going to have to get past Palpatine if the franchise was going to grow. And so eventually they were going to have a situation where they dealt with and killed off Palpatine once and for all. And really what The Rise of Skywalker ends up doing is killing off Palpatine once and for all. And it kind of seems like we're in the middle of The Rise of Skywalker right now as a society in a way. And that is what ultimately sat with me about the sequel trilogy as we've been on hiatus here. The idea that Star Wars movies have always held up a mirror to what's been going on in society, even as certain groups of folks like to say that it is just escapist entertainment. It's not, it never has been. It's always been political. We've talked about that on the podcast previously. I'm sure that you are aligned and on board with that idea in general. The sequels, for better or worse, turned out to be more prescient than we ever could have expected. And yeah, for all of that, I actually have come to appreciate them a lot more. And I'd love to hear what you think about that, what you think about the sequels these days, and what you think about it in terms of what we've been experiencing in our own lifetimes, and how anything lines up or resonates for you. So if you're catching this on YouTube, the comments are right there. If you're catching this on Spotify, there's a Q&A section or a comment section for each podcast, so please drop a comment there. If you're catching this anywhere else, then there's a blog post for the show's episode at SW7x7.com, and I'd love to hear from you there. And so that is going to do it for episode 0 of season 2. Skeleton Crew, of course, debuts in a couple of days, and we are going to talk about Skeleton Crew, of course, and probably maybe in a little bit different way from how we've talked about various Star Wars storytelling over the years. But yeah, we'll get to that soon enough. For now, it just remains for me to say I'm so glad to be back with you here, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.